Hi guys, today I am going to talk about my C-section experience. My daughter is now 4 months, so I'm 4 months postpartum. I didn't go through anything crazy. From my first ultrasound, well, like obviously she was so tiny, but she was floating breech. I think I had an ultrasound at 24 weeks when we found out the gender. She's a little girl. At 24 weeks, she was floating breech. Everything looked normal, like they weren't concerned. They figured that she'd move within a couple weeks. At my 30-week appointment, she was still floating breech. Like, she just was comfortable where she was. She wasn't moving anytime soon, and I knew that. My boyfriend knew that. But the doctors, my OB was like, oh, she'll move. Like, don't worry. Like, you won't have a C-section. You're not going to have a C-section. You'll be fine. So, at 32 weeks, I had another OB appointment, and she was still breech. I could feel her head under my ribs. She wasn't moving. She was just comfortable. She was always on my right side, and like sometimes she'd turn sideways, and I could feel her turn sideways. But other than that, she wasn't moving. She wasn't going head down. So at 34 weeks, I was scheduled to have a C-section for 38 weeks, and at my 38 week C-section, I was going to get another ultrasound just to be sure that she was still floating breech. So I think it was my OB appointment before my scheduled C-section at 38 weeks. I went in to see my OB, and of course I'm huge and uncomfortable because of her head in my ribs constantly. It was hard to breathe, hard to move, hard to get comfortable. Like, any position was just terrible. At my OB appointment the day before my induction, my C-section, my OB said to me that, she's like, we'll check you out to see how the baby's doing. If she's doing fine and you're not dilated, then we're going to reschedule the C-section for 40 weeks. And at this point, I had already worked myself up, got myself prepared that I was going to have a C-section tomorrow, and that was that. Like, I mentally prepared myself, like, got into the groove of things. So my OB walked out of the room, and me and my fiance were like, oh my god, like, this cannot be happening. Like, we were all prepared to have our baby girl tomorrow, and now she's saying you might have to wait another 2 weeks. So she came back into the room, and I thought this was kind of strange because I had a scheduled C-section, but she still wanted to see if I was dilated. So she literally did her thing to see if I was dilated, and at 38 weeks I was 3 centimeters dilated the day before my scheduled C-section. And she said that she wanted to check if my baby was still floating breech. So she ended up grabbing my little girl's foot while she was inside of me just to ensure that she was still breech. So she's like, okay, well, you're 3 centimeters dilated and she's still breech, so looks like we're gonna continue on with the C-section, so whatever. So I go home, and my mucus plug comes out because she went in me to check if I was 3 centimeters or to see if I was dilated and if the baby was still breech. And at that point, she had broke my mucus plug. So I got home, I literally laid on the couch, laid in bed, watched movies all day. I was having contractions. I wasn't sure if they were Braxton Hicks or actual labor pains because my whole from 8 to 9 months, my Braxton Hicks were insane. Like, they were so regular, some were couple minutes apart, and I always thought I was going to labor. I didn't really know what was true labor and what was actually Braxton Hicks. So the whole day I was having contractions, or Braxton Hicks contractions. I'm not sure what they were, but they weren't painful enough that I knew that I needed to go to the hospital, but they were painful enough where I went to the shower, did my whole thing, got all cleaned up, getting ready to go to the hospital just in case something were to happen overnight. So I was scheduled to go in for my C-section at 6 a.m. So and I delivered at the Belleville Hospital in Belleville, and I went in, filled out the paperwork. They were so sweet, so kind. I was hooked up to IVs right away. Um, it was like a really fast and easy process. So I got there at 6, did all my paperwork, got all my medication in, IVs, whatever. And then it was, what time was it? I think it was 7:30. Yeah, 7:30 when I actually went into the C-section room, and I was laying on the table. And at that point, my fiance couldn't come in the room with me because I had to get the spinal. And the spinal is I wasn't scared about having a C-section. The only thing I was scared about was having a spinal. I don't know why I was so scared, but I was petrified. So I was in tears, shaking, like so scared. And then I had the spinal, didn't even know I had the spinal because it didn't hurt at all. It didn't hurt me personally at all. I didn't even notice it. But the spinal was like easy. Like I don't know why I caused such a scene about it. So after my spinal, my fiance could come back in. They laid me on the table, but as soon as I got the spinal, my whole bottom half of me was completely numb. Like, it was the weirdest feeling in the entire world. Like, I felt paralyzed. I felt like, I don't know, it was just so strange. Like, until you experience it yourself, like, you'll never know the feeling. And then you're on the table like a rag doll, and they're like wiping you down and like taking your pants off and like getting ready for the whole procedure. Um, Anyway, so yeah, at 7:30 all that happened, and then there was lots of pulling and tugging. Felt no pain, just lots of pressure. I was scared I was gonna feel pain, but I literally felt nothing. Yes, but lots of pressure. And at 7:54, my little girl was born. Her name's Olivia. She was born at 7:54 and weighed 6 pounds and 12 ounces, or yeah, in 12 ounces. She was beautiful. She was healthy. I heard her cry. It was the best thing ever. Like, and my fiance went to go cut the cord and missed, so he cut like half through it, so we had to recut it. And he went away with the baby, and then they stitched me up. When we went back into recovery, my body temperature was below normal. Like, it was so low. So I didn't get a chance to do skin to skin with my daughter when she was first born. I was shaking, vomiting. I had the worst after recovery, and even when they were stitching me up, I had the worst pain in my left shoulder. And I guess it's something common from like the medicine that you get during the C-section. You'll feel like a really sharp pain in your shoulder. I forget what he said what it was from, but apparently a lot of women experience this pain. So that was with me for like hours, and normally it goes away just like that, but for me it was with me for hours. The shaking, the low fever, vomiting, just everything. It was so brutal. And so my fiance and my daughter did skin to skin because her temperature was also very low, so she needed the skin to skin to warm her up. And obviously it's so important in the first like couple minutes of their birth. So so he got to do that with her, which was really special. And I don't think I would have traded it. I mean, with our next child, I would love to do it, but I think it's nice that he had the chance to do something so special with her just like minutes after she was born. It's just so amazing. But it took me, I was in the recovery for 2 hours because I just was not progressing. And normally they said, like, once the baby goes on you for skin to skin, your shake should stop, your adrenaline should slow down, like mommy mode kicks in and it just helps you. But for me, it didn't. I needed to have, I forget what it was called, but they laid like a blanket on me, which had like a hair dryer basically inside of it. And that was full of hot air, and it was trying to warm up my body, and nothing was helping. And after more medicine and more heat and everything else, my body temperature went up, and I was released from the recovery 2 hours later into our room. And then I really got to spend time with our baby girl, like, because in recovery I couldn't hold her without vomiting, and at one point I had her because I just wanted her so bad, and I'm vomiting to the side, and I was like, I can't do this, like, it was so uncomfortable, and just, I felt so bad for her, like, she needed her daddy at that time. But yeah, after recovery, all of our family came, and it was such a process, and I was still so loopy, and everyone's like, oh, do you mind if I hold her? Can I hold her? I was like, no, take her. It's okay. Like, and at this point, I was still vomiting. I left the recovery, felt amazing, and then got to my room and was so sick again. So it was just there. It must have been the medicine I was getting. But my whole pregnancy, I had a terrible, terrible pregnancy. I was vomiting every single day. My first like 2 months of pregnancy, I lost like 15, 20 pounds because of how sick I was, and it was just crazy. But overall, the C-section was amazing. I would recommend it, like if you need it, obviously. It's amazing. It's so fast, although I really wish I could have experienced labor. Like, with my next child, I hope I get to experience the real labor, because I basically walked in, walked out with a baby. Like, it was amazing. But the recovery time for a C-section for me was a long time. It depends from woman to woman, but in the hospital, I couldn't change my daughter's diaper for the first 2 days we were in there. I couldn't get up, and what made my C-section worse was because I was so sick after I had my C-section. I was constantly like leaning forward to vomit, which was like putting more pressure on my freshly stitched up stomach, and it was just all of that, the pressure of everything just made it so much worse for me. The first day though, after I had my C-section, I was trying to get up and walk to get up to walk. I would make it to the washroom and then like feel like a sudden urge, like I need to sit down or I need to vomit. Like, even later in that day I was still vomiting. But it's so important for you to get up and just try to walk, even if you don't want to do it at all. You just need to. After the second day, my fiance had to help me shower, because I couldn't even step over the shower, because like that's how sore I was. Going home from the hospital, we lived on a country road, so the bumps, oh my god, it was absolutely terrible. It was just such a crappy experience. But it took me a good week to feel like myself, not myself, but like kind of myself again. But yeah, overall, C-section was amazing. I would do it again if I had the option, but like I said, I'd like to experience real labor pains and go through that whole natural birth, and I don't know. But yeah, that was my C-section story, and I love listening to other people's C-section stories, labor stories. It's so interesting to me, because birth is such an amazing thing, and I'm so happy I was able to experience it, and I can't wait for many more times, and so Olivia can have lots of brothers and sisters. But that is my labor and delivery story.